Fuck Batman.
A couple of months ago, in what is now one of the most popular videos on my channel, I discussed the problems with seasons 1 and 2 of DC's Titans. Since then, the long-awaited Red Hood season has finally come and gone. It's easy for me to say that it was an absolute mess. Unfortunately, this season emphasized the emotions I had as I watched season 2 on a week-by-week basis, constantly waiting for this show to get good. For every step forward that this show makes, there's also a step backward. It's almost like this show refuses to learn from its own mistakes. A big part of that is because once again, season 3 continued to do the same things I criticized season 2 for doing. Once again, introducing too many characters into the already massive roster of characters in this show. Once again, using trauma as a storytelling mechanism in a way that falls flat. And, once again, doing the thing I arguably hate the most regarding this show, using flashbacks. It wasn't as prevalent as it was in season 2, but season 3 still uses flashbacks to fill in the gaps that don't make sense for the ongoing plot of this season. If you want to know how I feel about that, here's what I said in my previous Titans video. It's like they want you to care about the past so badly, but at the same time want you to care about 15 other things going on in the present. It doesn't come off the way they want it to, because at that point, why not just start at the beginning of the timeline for this show? Why not just let us see the very beginning of the Titans, considering everything in the past is way more tolerable than the present? When you take all of those problems and combine it with a horrible Scarecrow, Jason being an inconsistent Red Hood, a half-assed Blackfire and Starfire story, a highly questionable use of the Lazarus Pit, and more, this season comes off much worse than season 2 did. Along with this, Titans once again fails to balance the character's screen time unless their name is Dick Grayson. Collectively, these continuous mistakes makes the third season of Titans feel like it overstays its welcome. The reason I say this is because somewhere along the lines, there is a great 8 to 10 episode long season within the third season of this show. Unfortunately, since this show continues to add characters, this season once again blurs too many sub-storylines together and stretches this season to 13 episodes long, leading to a disappointing final product of a season. With all that being said, structurally, I'm going to do something a little different for the rest of this review. I'm going to attempt to deep dive into the many subplots and problems of this overall season one by one. Don't worry, there are going to be timestamps throughout this video to make your life much easier. With that being said, let's dive into our first topic of this season. Red Hood and Scarecrow's storyline sucked. The Titans social media team should have never hyped up this Red Hood storyline on social media because honestly, it's not good. For what it's worth, I don't even have a problem with Curran Walters and his portrayal of Jason Todd. I found myself enjoying a lot of the heavier emotional scenes because you can tell how much he cares about bringing Red Hood to life. What I heavily dislike about his Red Hood portrayal is the direction the writers chose for Jason Todd in season 3. Jason is incredibly inconsistent throughout this season, with the best portion of his Red Hood in the first 3 or 4 episodes. After that, the Red Hood storyline falls off a very steep cliff. This is due to 3 reasons. A, the 5th episode of this season should have been the 1st episode of this season. B, the Titans writers misused the Lazarus Pit in a way that's straight up disrespectful in comparison to Arrow. And C, Jason's Red Hood story happens because he's being manipulated again, but this time by Scarecrow, who's a terrible villain. Episode 5, Lazarus, flashes back to 3 months before the events of season 3. Throughout this episode, we're given backstory so that every single aspect of the ongoing storyline can make sense. The writers dedicate this entire episode to give us exposition regarding what Jason was up to after season 2 by explaining who Jonathan Crane is and revealing what the writers likely felt was a major plot twist, which is Jason being revived by the Lazarus Pit. The problem with that is by the time you've reached the 5th episode, you don't care about Jason's death and revival anymore. There are so many other things going on: the introduction of Tim Drake, addressing Blackfire and Starfire's relationship, learning more about Barbara Gordon, and dealing with Hawk and Dove, that you can't help but think, why am I being shown this now? Also, Jason's revival never felt like a mystery because no one ever really questioned how Jason came back to life. There wasn't a major moment prior to this episode where anybody questioned Jason's revival. Everybody just sort of accepted it because they were too caught up in the chaos he raised in the first few episodes. Since these characters never thought of Jason's revival as a mystery, this episode feels out of place, and this reveal doesn't feel like a massive plot twist or feel like an oh shit type of moment. When you have an episode such as Lazarus where it ends at the same point episode 1 starts on, it feels incredibly weird that no one stopped and thought, why not make this the opener for this season? It would have laid the groundwork for everything that follows after Lazarus timeline-wise, and wouldn't have come off as trying to fill in the gaps that don't make sense at that point in time during the season. There's an even bigger problem beyond the placement and use of this Lazarus episode: the use of the Lazarus Pit itself. In Titans, the Lazarus Pit is nothing more than a glorified plot device. It's used once to revive Jason, a second time to revive Dick after he has arguably the most avoidable death ever done on this show, and a third time, which I'll be ranting about in a few minutes. In Arrow, the choice of using the Lazarus Pit is a heavy one. It's also typically a last-ditch effort and the very last option on the table that's reluctantly done because there are no other options. That's because of Arrow's well-established principle when it comes to such a usage. When you use the Lazarus Pit to bring someone back to life, the person being revived loses their soul. This often causes the person to experience bloodlust. In Titans, there is no negative effect at all when it comes to using the Lazarus Pit, and it's incredibly frustrating. I understand that in comic-related media, people die and come back to life all the time. It's a fairly normal thing. However, when it comes to the Lazarus Pit, which has been done before but in a different show, why didn't Titans writers use that as a reference point? Bringing someone back to life shouldn't be a simple decision and shouldn't lack any repercussions, because that is a big decision story-wise, or at least it should be in Titans, but it's not. The ironic part about the writers choosing to not go ahead with copying the Lazarus Pit rule from Arrow is that if they did, it'd be a better explanation for Jason's outrage and transformation into Red Hood. Mentally, when Jason began to go on his killing spree and doing all of his Red Hood shenanigans, I thought that was partially due to the Lazarus Pit. I thought, oh, they're actually gonna explain that reviving Jason broke something inside of him spiritually and awakened a darker part of him, thus leading to him being far more violent. Nope, that never happened. Instead, the Lazarus Pit is a pool of liquid that can be lifted out of the ground by Raven, Blackfire, and Starfire, only for it to be shot into the sky, which turns purple, by the way, reviving everyone in Gotham City? If you made it this far because you didn't want to sit through 13 episodes of nonsense, that is how the Titans saved the day in the finale. I still can't believe that someone somehow thought of this idea and multiple people thought to themselves, that's it, that's how we end the season. I don't know what's worse, that idea or the fact that Scarecrow somehow managed to take over Gotham through the season? Truthfully, I don't even know why someone thought that Scarecrow would be a great villain to put against these Titans, especially this iteration of Scarecrow. Sure, he's smart, but he isn't a powerful being, he isn't an alien, he isn't a Kryptonian, he isn't Tamaranian, he isn't funny, and he isn't clever. Scarecrow is just a regular dude named Jonathan Crane who's smart, went crazy because he was obsessed with fear, and managed to manipulate Jason into being Red Hood, which I hate. For what it's worth, I feel like not only did Jason not need Scarecrow to turn into Red Hood, but I hated that this was the direction chosen. Mainly because Jason already went through enough trauma to have his villain arc without a second person controlling his motives or pushing a motive that forces him into a specific direction. He went through so much that the dude went to therapy, which of course didn't do much for him because Jason is an asshole after all, but that's not the point. He was already struggling, and that's the only reason he went to Scarecrow, to reverse his fear gas so he can stop feeling fear. That's how fucked up Jason was after the Titans essentially traumatized him arguably for the rest of his life. Of course, Scarecrow was willing to help because he knew he could manipulate Jason and he'd have someone to terrorize the streets of Gotham for him, thus causing the Titans to ignore his plans. That's the only reason Jason and Scarecrow's partnership works. Even then, it felt like Scarecrow needed Jason more than Jason needed Scarecrow, because without Jason, it wouldn't have allowed the writers to stretch this season to 13 episodes. Do you know how easily the Titans could have and should have beaten Scarecrow with or without Jason distracting them? All it would have taken is Dick being a good leader and putting his ego aside for literally 5 minutes and realizing, hey, we have 2 aliens with superpowers that could beat Scarecrow's ass in the matter of seconds. Let's come together as a team, devise a plan that makes Scarecrow think that he has the upper hand, and then boom, Connor flies in with super speed and hits him with a single punch. That's it. That's all it would have taken. Even if Scarecrow was somehow giving kryptonite, thus preventing Connor from being the person to punch him. Starfire's there. She could have beaten his ass. Oh, he somehow had something to prevent Starfire from beating his ass. Oh, sick. Hey Raven, we need you to come in and use your powers to take Scarecrow down. There is absolutely no way that Scarecrow would have managed to have multiple backup plans to defend himself from Connor, Starfire, and Raven. This ridiculousness showed during the finale when the writers finally decided that Scarecrow was just a human. How did he get taken down? By a single punch thrown by Tim Drake, who doesn't even have powers, let alone proper training to throw a strong punch. So if Tim Drake could knock out Scarecrow, why couldn't one out of several superheroes take down Scarecrow way earlier on during the season? It makes literally 0 sense. If that wasn't problematic enough, for some reason, the writers of Titans decided that making Raven somehow throw up all of the negative emotions and trauma from the Titans onto Scarecrow at the end of the finale was a good idea. It wasn't a good idea. You want to know why? It's because even though Scarecrow was an awful human being that deserved to be locked in Arkham Asylum for life, throwing up or transferring multiple people's awful trauma onto him doesn't make Raven any better than Scarecrow. The job was already done. He was likely never getting out of Arkham Asylum unless the story needed that to happen, because that's how most things work in the Titans universe. It's even more ridiculous that they chose to make Dick and Raven walk away with smirks on their face after Raven did that, as if they finally done some good in the world. That's not what a hero would have done. Anybody, and I mean almost anybody in the Arrowverse, would have instantly been against that idea. Why? Because those characters know boundaries and are human enough to recognize that Scarecrow being locked in Arkham Asylum is more than enough. To them, the job would have been done and they would have moved on to worrying about the next metahuman of the week or main villain of the season. They would have totally been against the idea of doing that because that would have been stooping to his level, and that's something that Arrowverse characters wouldn't do. Alright, I'm done ranting about my problems with Red Hood and Scarecrow's stupid ass storyline. On to our next topic about this terrible season. Starfire and Blackfire's relationship deserved better. Heading into season 3, Starfire was just gaining momentum in terms of screen time and growth as a Titan. While Starfire was growing as a character on the show, Blackfire started to get teased as a major plotline for season 3. This caused a lot of rumors to swirl post season 2. A lot of people were hinting and assuming that Starfire and Blackfire's storyline was going to be a major part of season 3. For once, it felt like Starfire was finally going to be the face of a season in this show after having multiple storylines that genuinely felt more important than they were actually treated. Just to remind you, in season 1, Starfire was the side plot behind Dick and Raven's storyline. Starfire was struggling to find her identity throughout all of season 1. In season 2, Starfire finds her identity and becomes a genuinely likable, level-headed character. We even get to learn more about her culture as a Tamaranian, and that life comes back to haunt her, which slowly builds that Blackfire storyline. You know, the storyline that seems like it's going to be a big part of season 3. Unfortunately, this wasn't the case, and for the 3rd season in a row, I have the same exact thought about Starfire. She deserves better. Admittedly, I enjoyed Blackfire's presence throughout this season because she has several funny moments with different characters on the show. That isn't necessarily my problem with the Starfire and Blackfire relationship storyline in this season. The problem that I have with it is that it feels like an entirely different storyline than what was teased in season 2. It almost feels like they kind of didn't want to do the originally planned storyline but committed to a Blackfire storyline anyway since one was teased in season 2. For instance, this confrontation happens in season 2 that leaves you with the idea that this storyline is going to be important and going to lead towards a massive amount of tension in season 3.
I'm coming for you. Good.
However, that tension built in season 2 gets thrown out the window, and there's no real reason as to why that was done. For what it's worth, I fully understand that COVID ruined a lot of shows production-wise. I simply don't think that was the biggest reason that this season was bad. It just felt like there was a pivot from the originally planned season 3. It almost felt like the writers almost fell too in love with the idea of pivoting towards a Red Hood storyline and were like, we want to do this Red Hood storyline, but we have to still do something for Blackfire and Starfire, so let's just change their storyline entirely. What we got from that wasn't good. Starfire was once again relegated to another side plot, and it was incredibly frustrating to watch. Her storyline throughout the entirety of season 3 is that she's suddenly having visions out of the blue and it's causing her to do things without her knowing. The idea is to build a mystery that leads to an unsatisfying conclusion. Blackfire was on Earth the entire time? This reveal makes no sense because how could Blackfire be on Earth already without her coming to Earth being shown? In season 2, she's sending people over to Earth to get Starfire to bring her back to Tamaran. On top of that, she even projects herself to talk to Starfire as we saw in the scene that I've shown earlier. For Blackfire to somehow end up in the hands of a made-up government association that has never been hinted at and was never shown to be working on trying to capture Blackfire is such a pathetic reveal. Why would you spend so much time and effort trying to build up Blackfire just to go, you know what if she was already on Earth and she was trapped in a box that dampens her powers? That way Starfire feels bad for her and we could turn Blackfire into a likable character character with a likable relationship, only for us to then possibly hint at Blackfire still being a villain, stealing people's powers to psych the viewers out and go, oh well, nah, we're just kidding. What is the point in doing that? It is incredibly inconsistent and shows any lack of a cohesive long-term vision for these characters and this show. What makes this even more frustrating is the fact that the Tamaranian side plot towards the latter half of the season is legitimately interesting. Learning more about Blackfire and Starfire's childhood on Tamaran is far more interesting than anything else going on during season 3. Finding out that Starfire's powers were not her powers and that her parents forced someone to give Starfire the power of fire was a great plot twist that stood out in such a mediocre season. However, what absolutely didn't work for me whatsoever was the idea of instantly switching Starfire's powers without any explanation. Sure, yes, they give us the plot twist and reveal that Starfire has entirely different powers than Fire, but that isn't an explanation. That doesn't explain the sudden change in Starfire's powers. That doesn't explain why Starfire's powers are suddenly blue and spawning from a sudden vision. You can't just show us backstory and suddenly think that the backstory will serve the job of, well, we want to change your powers, but we don't know how to explain why we want to change your powers. Let's just use a flashback to explain that she always technically had different powers. No, that's not good storytelling. That's not a good enough reason to explain the sudden switch up. Why would you do such a disservice to such a likable character such as Starfire? It's fucking obnoxious, and odds are we'll likely get another flashback to explain the power change featuring a scene that wasn't in this season, because that's how Titans likes to tell its story. Speaking of likable characters, let's discuss one of the characters I like the least. It's time we talk about the Dick Grayson problem. Dick Grayson is easily the most self-absorbed, pretentious, obnoxious, egotistical, and incredibly annoying character in Titans. The number of times this man runs off to go do something that absolutely nobody agrees with has gotten way too damn high. The amount of times this man makes a poor decision and is shocked that it backfired is way too damn high. The amount of times they introduce a new woman in this show and Dick miraculously has a past with them that also includes having sex with them is way too damn high. The amount of times Dick makes a decision that harms the people who are supposed to be his team, his friends, his family, and are supposed to believe in him is way too damn high. Finally, the amount of screen time Dick Grayson takes away from literally every other character in this show is way too damn high. I am tired of this man getting so much screen time because all it does is make the show feel like the Dick Grayson show. Everything centers around him, and it's not even for good reasons either. It's mostly because Dick constantly has ego problems with every single character in this show. Whether it's Starfire calling him out on his bullshit, Connor putting Dick in his place, Dick treating Gar like shit or ignoring any responsibility that he should be taking. This show never feels like a Titan show. And it's incredibly frustrating because this show is supposed to be about every character and it's supposed to have a core storyline while other side plots slowly mix into the mainline story. However, that never happens because every single time you think something is finally straying away from Dick Grayson, here comes Dick putting himself into someone else's business. The ironic part about this is that for someone that's supposed to be the leader, a morally good character who can give people hope and help out their team, all Dick does is constantly harm others. Even when he's trying to run around as a superhero and attempting to save citizens, he still manages to fuck up being a hero. Whether it's forcefully breaking someone's arm or leg because, well, you know, superhero reasons, or getting someone killed because his awareness wasn't as strong as it needed to be, Dick Grayson is far from a hero and even farther from a good leader. To give a great example, let's bring Connor into the picture. Connor is the most lighthearted character in the show. He does almost nothing wrong, and if he does, it's typically because his emotions got the best of him, which isn't often at all. When Dick decides that he wants to run off alone to go confront Red Hood, Connor, of course, wants to help. In fact, that's what Connor always tries to do almost all of the time, help the Titans. Connor decides to put Dick in his place and tells him, dude, I am smarter, stronger, and faster than you. Let me help. I can make your life 10 times easier in this situation. Dick decides to take kryptonite, which is never explained where or how he got kryptonite, and then blows it in his face, thus making Connor paralyzed. And if that doesn't make things worse, he does it to Krypto too. Do you mean to tell me that's what a leader does? Prevent people from helping him in the most bullshit ways possible just because he has a fragile ego and a lone wolf complex? Come on, dude. Just because the writers don't know how to handle having Superboy and Krypto the Superdog on this show doesn't mean they deserve to use Dick as an outlet to voice that frustration. You know what came to mind after that scene immediately happened? Where the hell did he get that kryptonite? How the hell did he get that kryptonite? Why didn't he want Superboy's help? He could literally save Gotham from Scarecrow and Red Hood himself. What bothers me even further about Dick is that for some odd reason, everything Dick went through during season 2 suddenly didn't matter. Donna even has a scene with Dick where she tells him congrats on becoming Nightwing, as if Dick didn't go through a self-destructive path to become Nightwing in season 2. Like, what do you mean congrats on becoming Nightwing? There is almost no growth for Dick in season 3. He doesn't learn anything beyond having to finally trust Jason and give him a second chance, which shouldn't have taken him this long to do. The moment Jason deserved a second chance is when Dick almost got him killed in season 2 because he dropped Jason off the side of a building. That literally caused Jason to suffer from continuous trauma and PTSD. If there was ever a moment for Dick to take a step back and be like, man, I really need to treat Jason better. Maybe I should try to give him a second chance. That was the moment for it to happen. However, since Dick is still a self-absorbed, egotistical, lackluster leader, Dick didn't do so in season 2, and in season 3, Dick hasn't become any better of a person or leader. So, if anything, he was a better, quote-unquote, Nightwing at the end of season 2 than he was at the end of season 3. I am tired of the Dick Grayson centered plots. Just make him be a leader and let the spotlight be spread among the other cast of characters. It's been 3 seasons of the Dick Grayson show. It's time for a new formula already, which brings me to my next problem with this season and show overall. The lack of Gar and Raven. I probably should separate the lack of Gar and Raven into 2 separate categories, but considering this show loves to flirt with the idea of an on and off sort of kind of relationship with Gar and Raven, it only seems right to talk about them under the same section. I don't entirely know what the reasoning is, but for some reason the writers or showrunners seem like they hate Gar for whatever reason. He doesn't get enough screen time, he doesn't get any plot lines that legitimately explore his character, and all he ever gets to do is miss Raven. That is his role in the Titans, missing Raven. God forbid Gar gets to do anything else, such as caring about the Titans, trying to be there for the Titans, trying to make the Titans feel slightly better after a terrible situation happens, or anything positive in this show. He gets shunned from it instead. The only person besides Raven that cares about Gar is Starfire. The most obnoxious part about this is that Gar is the only lighthearted character with a personality on this show. Sorry Superboy, you might be lighthearted as well, but these writers have yet to give you an actual personality. It's tiring knowing that there's a character on the Titans that is right there that can shine if the spotlight is put onto him, and it feels like that spotlight is allergic to Gar. Do you know what frustrates me the most about the lack of Gar? Gar is arguably the most morally good character on this show. He's probably the only character on this show that cares about other people's feelings, that's constantly looking out for others, and trying to make everybody else happy even if he gets shit for it. Yet for some reason, the writers feel the need to punish Gar for being morally good while nearly every other character on this show is an awful person. Stop punishing the only morally good character for absolutely zero reason. It doesn't push the already blurred storylines forward by any means at all, and it's getting really old. There's absolutely no reason for this, because if Gar stayed with the Doom Patrol, I guarantee that he would shine on that show. You know what? Fuck it. Consider this a petition to put Gar back onto the Doom Patrol show if these writers aren't gonna do a damn thing with him on Titans. Also, it's outstanding that we are 3 seasons into this show and Gar has only transformed into a tiger. And no, having a bullshit storyline that leads him to becoming a bat just because the story needs him to become a bat doesn't count. That only happens because the writers couldn't find a better way to resurrect Dick Grayson from a death that should have never happened to begin with. I'm sorry, but I refuse to accept that low effort idea as a new transformation for Gar. Look, I understand that the budget might be tight for Titans, but the showrunners could spread some of the wealth to Gar. It feels like everybody else, whether it's Dick Grayson, Starfire, Raven, Blackfire, Superboy, or even Crypto the Superdog, gets more love special effects wise, and then there's Gar. If you're going to have budget problems that prevent a character who is meant to transform into multiple animals from transforming into multiple animals, maybe stop adding too many characters to the show. That way, until you figure out how to consistently manage a character such as Beast Boy, he doesn't have to suffer for the sake of the show's half-assed storylines. As for Raven, just like the rest of the many questionable decisions throughout season 3, I don't understand what the point of her character was this season. In season 2, Raven's storyline ends with her heading off to the Mascara to learn more about controlling her powers along with reviving Donna Troy. If you ask me, that's a pretty pivotal storyline that should be extensively explored in this season. Instead, Raven doesn't show up until the 7th episode of this season, which is, of course, highly noticeable. Raven has always been a top priority in Titans since season 1. The show has always prioritized Raven's lack of control with her powers, Raven's traumatic backstory, Raven's connection with Dick Grayson, and then everyone else in the cast of Titans. I don't understand how the writers and showrunners didn't think we'd realize the massive lack of Raven in this season. It's such a baffling decision, and it's honestly a self-made problem. This is the result of what happens when you have too many storylines that you want to tell at the same time. And that is the result of being incapable of planning a cohesive season, which is the result of having too many characters on the show. And if you want to know what that's the result of, that is the result of attempting to cover up the show's flaws by adding fan favorite characters to an already bloated show. The reason this bothers me so much is that Raven's storyline heading into season 3 seemed highly important and interesting. I wanted to see Raven learn how to tame her powers in the Mascara so we can see her character grow beyond being scared of herself. It would have been interesting to see someone like Raven, who's been the damsel in distress for a big portion of this show, being put in a situation where she's learning from experienced fighters not named Dick Grayson. Instead, we get a small montage of her fighting and watching her pretty much get scorned during her time at the Mascara. Of course, everyone understands why she'd get scorned. Pretty much everyone outside of the Titans is fucking terrified of Raven. Her powers scare them, but the last thing I wanted to see was Raven getting scorned again. I understand having to keep that as a consistent bit throughout the show, but putting Raven in an environment that had the opportunity to grow her character in a positive positive direction and give her people that liked her would have done wonders for her. And no, I'm not saying that Gar's friendship with her isn't enough, but I'd love to have characters outside of Dick or Gar have an actual mentor relationship with Raven. Someone that can come and go when the plot needs Raven to have someone sitting down with her and guiding her through the trouble that serves the bigger plot of a season. They've already done it a million times for Dick. I don't see why they can't do that for Raven, but in a lesser fashion. I'm not asking for much here, even if someone were to say, but what's stopping Raven from always having that hypothetical person as a crutch? How can you limit Raven from always being able to call that person in a time of need? Well, I don't know. How about dedicating a season to giving Raven character growth so she doesn't always need to be in a time of need? Or here's a thought, the roster of Titans characters is massive at this point, so why would Raven need to consistently be put into the position of calling someone outside of the Titans for help? Or if we had gotten more screen time that showcased Raven's growth during her time at the Mascara, they could have made it someone from the Mascara. That way, all you have to do is use Donna and give her a line of dialogue about the Warriors in the Mascara having a different priority. It doesn't have to be that detailed of an answer, it just has to be a simple, viable answer that prevents it from being Raven's crutch. The point I'm trying to make is that for every mistake Titans makes, whether it's with the overall plot in a season or odd choices for characters like killing a superhero at a carnival, there's another idea that could have been done instead. All it takes is sitting down and truly thinking out where you want the overall season to go or where you want a specific character to end up by the end of the season. And it seems like if the fan base is vocal enough, the writers or showrunners might sit down to address this feedback because they did the exact opposite of what I expected them to do. A half-assed apology. They finally apologized for the ending of season 2. Look, despite everything I've complained about in this video and my previous Titans video, the worst decision ever made was killing off Donna Troy. Bringing Donna back to life and showcasing to us that even she was disappointed with her death in Purgatory was not intentional, or at least a part of the plan for season 3. The 9th episode, entitled Souls, very much felt like the showrunners apologizing after such a massive backlash and kind of saying, "Oh right, we get it. You guys didn't like our decision of killing Donna off. Here, Donna's back. Are you happy now?" However, in doing so, just like the rest of this season, it felt half-assed. I understand that this episode was created to address the massive backlash post season 2, but it still felt like something was off. Firstly, the whole premise that Donna, Tim, Hank, or anyone else just needed to find a bridge that has a portal that brings anyone back to life is way too simple. Unintentionally, it removes the significance of other resurrections such as Jason and Dick's via the Lazarus Pit, which should have been a bigger deal and have bigger repercussions. Plus, this episode was missing any connection to the ongoing real-world plot to make it have way more significance beyond pleasing the fans. The answer was right in their face the entire time, but for some reason they chose not to do it. They should have at least connected the portal to Raven and her powers. All that we needed was a shot of her once again trying to use her powers to bring Donna back to life in the Mascara and showing us that she opened up a portal in Purgatory. It didn't even need to be an ongoing thing throughout the episode. All that was needed was 2 scenes showing us Raven using her powers and then a scene showing us the portal opening up. It didn't necessarily need to be a gigantic plot point where Raven discovers that she successfully brought Donna back to life. However, I will say that if she did find out, she would have had a massive confidence boost and it would have made her time in the Mascara not feel like a gigantic waste of time or like a thrown away plot point. Secondly, Hank did not deserve a happy ending at all. I'm sorry, Hank sucks. He has never once been a good person throughout his time during Titans. I find it laughable that the showrunners or writers decided that Hank deserved this happy sunset. All he ever did was treat people like trash, act like an obnoxious know-it-all, and continuously put Dawn through bullshit for no damn reason. He's never had an actual actual moment of growth. He's never had a moment where he was self-aware enough to realize that he was being the problem in a situation, and he never once apologized to anyone but Dawn. Even when Hank tried to be a good person to Dawn, the damage was too ingrained, and he was only doing it because he felt guilty, not because he was trying to be a good person. So the idea that he gets to go off like this incredible hero that sacrificed his life for the sake of Donna and Tim isn't believable, nor is it deserved. It's just one of those things that don't work for me and highlights how bad this show's consistency can be. If you disagree with me on this, fair, but I genuinely don't think Hank deserved anything positive for his ending, and he was nothing more than a glorified plot device during this episode. I'm sorry, Hank sucks, and I will always stand on this hill. Thirdly, and I fully acknowledge that this criticism is going to be a nitpick, I wish that they gave us a scene of Tim and Donna's resurrections. We got them for Dick and Jason, but we didn't get any resurrection scenes at all for Tim or Donna, which stood out immediately to me. They went through their massive journey in purgatory only for the show to just cut to them being alive again and wandering in different locations. I understand that pacing is a thing, and it's a key ingredient that plays a massive part in making or breaking a TV show or movie. However, in the case of Titans, if you're trying to dedicate a whole episode to apologizing to your fan base, just go all out. Go the whole 9 yards and make sure every single detail makes sense, even if it slightly slows down the ongoing plot. Not that this show has a plot that makes any logical sense. The lack of any emotional resurrection scene just feels like a missed opportunity because it could have been a big moment for this season. It could have been the standout moment for Titans Season 3. With those criticisms out of the way, it's only right that I also give credit where credit is due, since I have a history of doing so on this channel. If there's anything throughout the entirety of Season 3 that I could point at and go, this is the best thing about this season, it's Tim and Donna's friendship. Without any second guessing, I can immediately say that it's the highlight of this season, and it's something that I wish we got more of. Granted, I understand that their friendship happened under terrible circumstances. Despite that though, I enjoyed watching Tim and Donna bounce off of each other throughout Purgatory and in the real world. Instead of the typically terribly done mentor-mentee dynamic Titans has a history of doing, it was more of Donna being a caring guardian for Tim. You can tell that even though she didn't know him, she was concerned enough to be patient with him and be understanding of his situation. She put aside her struggles to try and take care of Tim, and honestly, it was heartwarming. Their chemistry was built from a genuine place, and you felt the impact of that in the real world. After everything Tim has been through, he was still eager to try and become a Titan. Meanwhile, Donna's like, slow your roll, understand how important it is to be a Titan, understand the circumstances and weight that come with being a hero, and realize that it isn't as easy as it seems. Truthfully, we're seeing Donna being honest with Tim and genuinely trying to prevent him from being put in harm's way again as needed. After everything they've been through together, you can tell that all she wants for him is to be safe rather than him being a Titan. Even though the season ends with him being somewhat of a Titan, I hope we get to see more of their dynamic. I'd love to see Tim and Donna together more often, and her teaching him various lessons or helping him grow as a hero, because she's a perfect match to be the person who looks out for him. Not Gar, not Superboy, not Raven, and definitely not Dick Grayson. Keep Tim as far away as you can from Dick, cause all he'll do is fuck him over somehow and give him unnecessary trauma. Give us more of Donna and Tim's friendship and banter, because it was the best thing in this season. Hell, give those two a spin-off show where Donna's working for Argus and let Tim be a hero under her watch as he tries to actively learn how to be something better than a Titan, because being a Titan sucks. So, where does the show go from here? Before I even go into my closing thoughts, whether you sat through specific sections of this video and jumped to see this conclusion, or you managed to somehow sit through the entirety of this video, just know that I absolutely appreciate it. I've put a lot of time, effort, and thought into creating this review, and it means a lot to me that anyone would sit through what is now my longest video on my channel. With that being said, it's clear to me that Titans has no clear route to go for its future. There are too many storylines in progress, there are too many characters to create a season that's narratively focused, and it is way too late into the show for the show to get its shit together. I'm not saying that Titans can never reach a positive note because, let's all be honest here, the show can only go up from here. I say that now trying to be fair and trying to be open-minded, but deep down inside, I know that season 4 will likely disappoint us in another stunning fashion again. If I'm being truthful, there are only 2 routes to go for this show, or at least these characters, to ever reach their potential. Route 1 is giving Dick Grayson less of a spotlight in season 4 and creating a smaller, focused season based on the Titans bonding against a smaller conflict. Doing this would feel like a buffer season and feel like the season might not have a point, but it'd be a warm welcome and a breath of fresh air. After the last 3 seasons, I know damn well that I could use something like that rather than a bunch of disappointing villains with multiple subplots that are half-assed. A chemistry building season is more than welcomed and could do wonders for the Titans, assuming it reaches season 5. Route 2 is taking these same actors and giving them their spin-off shows with a new supporting cast of characters. Take some of the fan favorites such as Superboy and Crypto and give them their show where they can give them a plot that suits their power level. Plus, it'd give them an actual plot for once. Or, as I suggested earlier, give Donna and Tim their spin-off show, where they work together for Argus. Hell, put Gar back on Doom Patrol, so he can have a place where he fits in and isn't kicked to the curb as well, considering these characters in Doom Patrol all shine for their own reasons. The point I'm trying to make is that these characters are salvageable if they're given a reset button and a new opportunity to grow from the ground up again. I'd like to see Route 2 more than Route 1 because they'd find a way to fuck up Route 1 way more than Route 2. DC's Titans once again managed to fumble another season, and honestly, it's getting old. It's getting tiring to see so many avoidable and repeated mistakes in another brand new season. If the people behind this show simply learned from their mistakes, the show would be good. Season 3 would have gotten the ball rolling and would have been a solid season, but unfortunately, that's not the case. There are way too many things happening during Season 3 in order for anyone to take anything away from it beyond its obvious flaws that stand out on their own. I say this because Season 3 basically disregarded the entirety of Season 2 and it heavily showed. So why should we contain any small amount of hope that Season 4 will respect Season 3 and do a good job at positively continuing these ongoing storylines? If anything, the one feeling that continues to linger as I watch Titans is the ever-growing feeling of wanting this show to finally live up to its potential. I don't have much hope for Season 4, but in short, Season 3 was incredibly disappointing even when you binge watch the show instead of waiting for each episode on a weekly basis. Simply put, all I'm asking is for one decent season where it's clearly shown that the showrunners and writers have learned from their mistakes. Is that too much to ask? As always, if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button. If you really enjoyed this video, hit that sub button. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, write a comment down below. Don't forget to keep it real with peace, love, and positivity.